and get started. First of all, as an overview, we'll try to keep this, the entire phone call to about 30 minutes. I'll try to present the information in about 20 and leave some time at the end for any questions people may have. First, I'll just take a few minutes as we get rolling and describe my background, what we do and our firm does. From there, I'll go into the information that I have been asked to research and provide to the participants today. That primarily entails around the current pharmacy informatics landscape, the job landscape, the future landscape, what things are looking like down the road, why a pharmacist background may be necessary, and what involvement it may have overall within the industry moving forward. And from there, excuse me one second here, I'll take a little bit of time to talk about how pharmacists fit into the big picture overall of healthcare informatics. And also been asked to talk a little bit about how retail pharmacists may be able to get their foot in the door and what role they may play overall within the industry. So from there, very briefly, I've been in the search and recruitment business for the last 18 years. Primarily, most of that has been in the healthcare IT aspect of things within the healthcare industry. About the last 5 or 6, we've transitioned into that area that's evolving in informatics. I started Healthcare IS in 1998. We have several practices, each focusing in different areas of software implementation. And during the time we've been in existence, we've worked with, we're just coming up on about 170 different organizations on a national basis. Those tend to primarily be with inpatient as well as outpatient organizations, physician practices. We do work with some consulting firms as well as vendors out in the marketplace. Day to day, I personally lead our pharmacy, IT, and informatics practice. And we placed our first IT pharmacist back in 2005. It was interesting how that occurred. We had an organization, it was the University Medical Center on the West Coast. They were looking to implement a pharmacy application. Having already implemented other applications throughout the organization, they really began to see the need to bring clinicians into their IT area so that, and I'll go into more detail later, but the main reason was credibility and assistance in that project. So we'll talk a bit about that, but that was our first entrance into placing pharmacists into, at that time, the IT area, and today quite a bit in the informatics area as well. The first thing I want to mention overall is how did I come up with the information that I'll be talking about today? Well, first, we have many clients, as I mentioned, throughout the marketplace on a national basis. And what I hope to share from you are some of the things that I hear day to day from our actual hiring managers, the companies that come to us to help them find people for full-time positions. And one thing I may not have noticed is we also do place consultants as well. But in our full-time practice, a lot about how the positions are evolving, the information we're receiving from clients and how that information is evolving into the different types of people they're looking for, and how maybe the same job has evolved from a few years back to today. Also, I'll share some of the perspectives of what I hear from candidates in the marketplace, those people that we're actually placing on positions with our clients, the people that are doing it today, and some of the things that they're looking at and they're considering as they're managing their careers. Also, for my preparation for today, I actually took some of the questions that were sent to me, some of the information that I was asked to provide, and sent these questions to informatics pharmacists that I've known. Of all the pharmacists I sent them to, I think at a minimum I've known people for 3 years plus. These are pharmacists that are working in inpatient settings. A couple of them are working for vendors. They're at community hospitals. They're working in multi-entity health systems. So I'm trying to do the best I can today to stay away from my personal opinion, but provide information that is actually coming from people that are in the marketplace and doing the work day to day. Overall, I want to give a little bit of guidance about how to use the information that's being presented. This is clearly an evolving marketplace. What I have to present today clearly isn't the end-all be-all. I know that people today are listening and determining how they can use this information to help guide themselves in their career. And you know what, I think that this could be a very good starting point for somebody who's deciding whether or not they want to get into a career in informatics. And just as importantly, if you're already in informatics, in the informatics function today, within an organization. This could be something that you could clearly add to your bucket of knowledge in helping you guide and do research as to where you want to head in your career. So, having said that, what is pharmacy informatics? I think it's a very tough phrase to describe and get consensus on. I think if you were to go and talk to 10 people in the marketplace today and ask them what pharmacy informatics is, you may not get 10 answers, but you'd certainly get 4. So what I decided to do, just to use this as a basis of our discussion, I went to the University of Illinois Chicago website and used their definition. And what they have there, the pharmacy informatics is a subdiscipline of health informatics that deals with the integration of information technology and its applications in the pharmaceutical practice. It focuses on leveraging technology systems and medication use to ensure optimal patient safety and health outcomes. So that's kind of the framework that I'm using for the information that we're gathering today. But having said that, I think there's still a lot of, I don't want to necessarily say confusion, but lack of consistency in the marketplace. As you explore careers in this field, there are a lot of different titles in the job market for positions that I've seen that do literally the same thing. I think you can look at positions for an informatics pharmacist, an IT pharmacist, maybe even a pharmacy IT analyst. And although they all have different titles, you can find that from one organization to another, that IT pharmacist and informatics pharmacist can be doing 80% of the same position. And you can also many times find nurses, physicians in pharmacy analyst roles doing very similar tasks as an IT pharmacist. So the first thing I was asked to speak about was, or is the current job landscape. Excuse me. And what I would say overall is that there is a lot of stability in the market as it relates to this pharmacy informatics job market. And overall it is, in my opinion, over the 18 years, it's about as strong as any niche market that I've seen over that period of time. A lot of that today is being driven by ARRA, which is American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which has a big component of that dedicated to the implementation of technologies in healthcare settings. Organizations are trying to become meaningful use compliant. There's a lot of financial incentives for providers to adopt certain aspects, certain criteria of technology that has been put out there as incentive right now. And although this was an evolving market that was getting stronger prior to 2009, things have certainly picked up since meaningful use criteria has been put in place. If we look into the future a little bit, and in terms of future, I look at the 3 to 5 year standpoint, I still think it's very strong. I think there was a concern overall in the marketplace that there would be a big, a quick 2 to 4 year rush, 2 to 5 year rush, and things would die down quite a bit. But I think as things are moving forward, from a lot of the people that I'm talking to day to day, what's being realized is that organizations are working very hard right now to meet government-imposed timelines. And organizations are doing the best they can to hit those timelines, meeting it at a minimum criteria level. So what we're seeing right now is that systems, technology is being implemented very fast. People I'm talking to today feel like the demand and the work will be prolonged a bit due to going back and optimizing everything that's being put in place today. The second thing that I'm seeing quite a bit, and this is not being too publicized, but some of the timelines are very aggressive for certain sized organizations. If an organization out there does not have the financial resources or the personnel resources, it can be very difficult for them to hit some of these timelines. So although they may not be publicizing it, there are folks that I'm talking to that have said they're going to be attempting to eventually meet the criteria that's put in place, but they recognize that they can't do it at the pace that's being asked to do. So you're going to see continued technology install, technology implementation going beyond the dates of meaningful use. Informatics is an area that's going to continue to grow. As I have written here, informatics is going to just continue to play a larger role in diagnosing and treating patients. And with that, there will be new technology out there to maximize and get the most out of information and data that's being accumulated. Therefore, I think the demand will stay out there beyond as what we see today in the market as a whole. And along in that last point, as that data is captured, there will be new ways to maximize the information that's being accumulated. So from there, one of the things I was asked to talk about a little bit is to discuss why a pharmacist background is necessary. And I think, that pharmacist might be a little too, might be pigeonholing it just a bit. It could also include nurses, it can include physicians, people that are dealing in the area of medication. But what's very important, first and foremost, is pharmacists talk the language. I think going back to the example that I mentioned at the first or second slide, that first project our firm worked on, the organization had a lot of difficulty from an IT perspective getting buy-in as to increasing the confidence level and the credibility level of the IT department when they didn't have staff that could go out and talk to people in departments and demonstrate that they knew what their job was, how they were doing their job, and maybe how to improve their job before implementing technology. So talking the language is very important. Knowing the workflow of the department was very important. These are some answers that I've gotten back from speaking to pharmacists and asking them why they felt their jobs might be easier today because they are pharmacists. And each of them talked about knowing the department and the workflow. What might be a little bit redundant what I just said, but having that credibility in dealing with other pharmacists or other people that are dealing with medications and patients on a day-to-day basis is very important to have. Again, this was another tidbit that came back from another pharmacist, understanding the workflow, focus and specific needs of a pharmacy operation as a whole. Very important. And lastly, I highlight that first, I go back to that example, the organization that we worked with at the time, with hindsight, was ahead of their time, bringing, we had seen a number of nurses and even some physicians, but that was the first step back in 2005 where we saw pharmacists being brought in on a very consistent basis. So how do pharmacists fit into the big picture of things? Well, first of all, again, from the questions that I got back from the people that I talked to, they're the key in managing medication therapy in informatics. That was something that just, the credibility that comes along with that is very difficult to replace. Knowing how to manage the creation and maintenance of all the medication therapy within an information system can be a pretty complex task, as many organizations are finding out. And so pharmacists that have their trained knowledge along with having gained some IT expertise are bringing a lot of value to the marketplace today. And in line with everything that I've said, pharmacists are bringing a unique perspective to help drive the decision-making process. That's one of the keys that's not always giving as much credit to and time that's necessary. The better you can do on the planning on the front end of any of these systems, the better it's going to be. The technology is not there just to implement. The technology that is there, this is information that came back a number of times, to focus on the technology being the tool to help implement the ideal processes. And so the better decision-making up front, the more happier it seems that end users are with the technology that's eventually implemented. Another interesting point that was brought up in terms of why a farmer, or how does a pharmacist fit into a big picture, is we're seeing technologies that are going throughout the entire organization today. There used to be a time when an order would eventually end up in pharmacy, and that information would be dealt with in pharmacy, and something would, the order would be dispensed and administered. Today what we're finding with CPOE is that the silos are really changing quite a bit. Systems are being set up to enable nurses and physicians to put orders in place, and pharmacists have to make sure at the same time that these systems are usable, that that data and information still comes into the pharmacy in a way that it is workable. So having somebody that has the overall organization, operational focus, and workflow in mind as well as understanding pharmacy information, how that information best flows in a pharmacy is something that's critical and still needed, and probably going to be needed as time goes on. As informatics departments are continually expanding, we're seeing different areas of specialty, and so pharmacy is at the center of a lot of this, and it's very important to have someone who's knowledgeable about as broad a spectrum as they can be. And also, one of the pharmacists brought up a very interesting point to me. He said that a lot of individuals are accustomed to analyzing a tremendous amount of data, or much more data, in the new car they purchase than they are in the choice of what drug they use. And I think, just as I've noticed over time personally, going into outpatient clinics and having a family, the time that is spent with a pharmacist talking to a patient before something is handed to them, as there's more information out there and we're educating patients in the marketplace, or in the patient care arena, there's clearly lines where patients don't need to be as in tune with all of the details as one has in becoming a pharmacist, but there is an emphasis on making sure that patients are educated. And the one aspect that I'll say from my personal experience, it seems to be that the pharmacist is the one that, especially in an outpatient environment, talking to patients before they leave with medications. So in coming to one of the later points here in the overall discussion, how can a retail pharmacist get involved? How can they get involved in informatics? And I put this into maybe 2 bullets here because I heard 2 general comments back from the pharmacists that I talked to. Number one is that getting into pharmacy informatics in a hospital setting really requires the hospital pharmacy operational experience. Said that a number of times. In order to implement technology, the right questions have to be asked up front about the operation. That has to be done during a planning process, and the technology and automation is used to make that process as efficient and as effective as possible. So it's very difficult for someone in retail to walk in the door and bring value immediately if they're not familiar with their operation. But they certainly have would think with some effort, the foundation is there to be able to become familiar with what's going on in the hospital. But that's certainly a key. The challenge isn't how to get from retail into the hospital, or I should say the challenge in doing so is gathering that information so that you're qualified to walk in and be able to do things necessary to help that hospital pharmacy or the processes within the hospital plan their technology implementations. But the second thing that came up a number of times, and I know this is a little bit longer, is that healthcare systems are breaking down the barriers between inpatient, outpatient, and community pharmacies. And one of the things that was highlighted a number of times is that a true electronic health record really must include all the aspects of healthcare for the individual patient. And that doesn't necessarily stop during hospitalization. So as information is gathered at the hospital and a patient leaves the hospital with their meds that need to be used after that hospital care, there's certainly interaction with the patient that somebody outside of the hospital has. And as these silos continue to break down, they look, from the people that I talk to that are in hospitals today, they really talked about ways that information that's being gathered today and the results that are happening at the end will be used in overall decision support and educating those retail pharmacists as well to be able to play a bigger role in contributing to the overall aspect of the process. So in conclusion, I think going back to the beginning of the presentation, I'd highlight again that we're in a strong, growing job market overall. From some of the things that I've been hearing and continue to hear, the signs are pointing towards continued growth. Also within the market, pharmacy informatics today is somewhat viewed as a niche, but I would say as someone who's in the market and filling positions with employers and a wider range of employers, that even within pharmacy informatics, niches are developing. Technologies that are going in, such as CPOE, e-prescribing, process of med reconciliation, bedside barcoding. In the consulting practice that we work in, they're clearly specialists today in each of those areas. So there's the big picture of pharmacy informatics, and then there's becoming the specialty process of certain types of automation and technology within that full gamut. I used to hear a saying that said, all things being equal then, and I realized that there weren't many times where all things were equal. So I like to use a phrase that says, all things being close. And I think if you're in informatics today and you're thinking about which way to guide your career, or if you're thinking about getting further education in this area, I would say today that all things being close, advanced education and studying in informatics, an informatics degree is beginning to make a difference right now. I think the reasons why it has not made, in my opinion, as much of a difference in the past is that there were not many programs or curriculums in place in the informatics area. As we're continually seeing degrees for informatics be implemented at several different places, several different universities. I don't have any numbers on how many there are today compared to the past, but I am seeing a number of resumes coming my way with an informatics degree. I'm beginning to be asked for that, especially in full-time roles, full-time leadership roles specifically. So if this is something, a career path that you're in or looking to get into, it would be worth really considering advanced education. And one of the other things that I heard just the other day from a CMIO that I was talking to is that he asked me specifically when I was presenting candidates to him that he wanted to have some sense that the people who he's considering for his, and this was a pharmacy informatics coordinator role, that they truly had a plan to be in this place or a plan to be into this type of a role at some point in their career, as opposed to somebody who just happened to bounce from a position to a position. And what that tells me, and I'm sure that there's several opinions on that, but what that tells me is that the people that are doing the hiring are starting to see how this is really becoming a career path for people. And they're wanting, in order for them to make their decisions on who they want to hire, they're wanting to make sure that people they're hiring aren't just sticking their foot in the water and seeing if this is a good path for them. They're wanting to know that this is where people are going to be. So much of the experience that provides the most value is what you're going to get when you're on the job, and these employers that are making these hires recognize they need to hire qualified people, but there's a lot of knowledge that individual is going to gain while they're in this role, and they want to make sure that it's a path that they're happy with and want to be in. So that's another reason to consider an advanced degree in an informatics aspect of things. So having said that, I'm more happy to open up the floor for questions. On the screen, of course, is my information, phone number, and email address. Feel free to contact me if there's anything more specific than the general questions that we're able to get to today. Also, just as a sidebar, for those of you that are on LinkedIn, we do have a group. The group's called Healthcare IS, Pharmacy IT, Pharmacy Informatics, CPOE, and there's a number of discussions that are on there in relation to career, the types of backgrounds that are important for your career, as well as how organizations are dealing with these technologies that are being implemented today. Happy to have you join our group online as well. Thank you for your time. Be open to any questions.
Thank you, David. That was both comprehensive and very interesting. I want to open it up for questions at this time. We have a chat function at the bottom of your option bar, and within that, if you'd like to type a question, I can then relay that to David, and he can then answer that question. So if you can go ahead and do that right now, that would be wonderful. We have a question coming in. It is a long one. This person has a BS in pharmacy, an MBA in healthcare systems and retail hospital, and a pharma company experience with management, project management experience. I believe the question is another master's enough, or do I need to go for a PhD? If a master's is enough in informatics, you still need a PhD to teach, right? I think that this may be a little bit I mean, I don't know if you've, David, had any experience with putting people into faculty positions at universities, but I'm assuming that, well, from my experience, I can answer this question. You don't necessarily need a PhD to teach. But if you'd like to speak a little bit more about putting someone in a role with that sort of background, that would be great. So someone that does really have all of that experience and education, you know, how easy is it for to place someone in a position right now?
I don't have experience at a faculty level,
Mm-hmm.
and I very rarely, just to address that, I very rarely have a position that comes to our firm where the PhD is required. The advanced degree, I think, again shows that the mindset was there, that this was a career field that the person wanted to be in. And I think as what I'm seeing right now is the curriculums are really laying a nice foundation. They're adjusting to giving someone that foundation that's going to enable them to walk in the door and have tools to be able to do this type of position. Nothing's going to beat that hands-on experience, but a lot of people don't have that educational foundation in specifically informatics. And most people who've gotten into pharmacy informatics are pharmacists that worked in a pharmacy department, and that organization was going to be implementing some technology, and the pharmacy director would ask who has an interest, somebody would have an interest, and then they were in the door. And that's still happening out there, but I think moving forward, as the industry gets more populated with people who have been doing informatics and have pharmacy informatics degrees, they're going to expect a little bit more of a foundation moving forward.
Okay, great. I have another question, and that question is, what sort of are the salary ranges for someone that's in a pharmacy informatics role?
What I've tended to see in general is that each marketplace, each geography has its standard pharmacy compensation. So whether, I'm on the West Coast, whether you have San Francisco or LA or Fresno market, they each have a standard compensation for an inpatient pharmacist. What I tend to see is that the informatics pharmacist makes about the same thing, about the same salary as what the hospital would pay, plus about 5 or 10% because it is a salaried role. There will be times during projects where it's going to be necessary to work more than 40 hours a week, and since it's a salary, rather than getting an overtime pay, they're already building in about that 5 to 10% increase in additional compensation.
Okay, wonderful. A question came through, and it was, where can I have a higher degree in informatics online? Well, you can have one at the University of Illinois at Chicago. We offer a master's in health informatics and a postmaster's in health informatics. So that's a question that I can answer. David, a question for you. Where do you recommend a pharmacy informatics where do you recommend that a pharmacy informatics role be placed within an organization structure? So I would assume within a hospital, within a healthcare setting. How do you see that position correlate with the other various, I guess, departments in that hospital?
I don't know if I have a strong opinion on where that should be. I think that's a byproduct of the culture of the facility. I do see three main things right now. I see them in generally speaking, you will see the pharmacy informatics person in the pharmacy unless there's a clinical informatics department, and that clinical informatics department will have representation from all of the departments within that department as a whole. But going back to what I've seen in some of the slides, the bigger question is, or another way to look at it is, what are the tasks that need to be done? Because I do see informatics pharmacists in pharmacy doing things like building order sets, which has traditionally been done in an IT department. And I've seen people within an informatics department building order sets, which is in the past is done in an IT department. So each organization is completely different. I think you'll find that each of those organizations, there's no two that are alike out there. But the key is the role, the specific functions of the position, and what you're doing. Each organization is going to feel like there's more value in doing it in different departments. So I hope it wasn't too long-winded there, but I don't think we're going to see commonality anytime soon in where specific tasks, specific positions are found in a hospital.
Mm-hmm. Well, that makes sense. As far as a retail pharmacist is concerned, it seems that there are a lot of questions coming in with people from that background, and they want to know if they really are interested in getting into pharmacy informatics. What would be their steps? Would someone with this background probably benefit quite a bit from a master's degree in health informatics? Wouldn't you say, or some of the other steps? What would you consider them to be, or what would you recommend to others?
Well, I would say, number one, I do speak to a lot of retail pharmacists, a lot of retail people that want to get into informatics, and the challenge is that the specific knowledge base or skill sets that a hospital may be looking for, most retail pharmacists don't have. So as you just mentioned, to demonstrate that it's a path you want to go down and having that advanced degree, that is a step one. That will it get you the position? Well, that's going to be different from organization to organization, but it is something that, regardless of the organization, will help you stand out compared to someone with similar background and they don't have that advanced degree. The second thing is you just have to find a way to get the experience, whether that's, I've talked to some retail pharmacists that, it's not always a popular thing to say, but they've worked. Yeah, if they were able to get their foot in the door into a hospital project, they've done it at a compensation rate on a short-term basis. It provides a win-win. They get the experience they're looking for, so that for that next position they can say they have the experience, and the hospital was able to save in terms of their budget cost by getting somebody that has some overall knowledge, but not specifically the knowledge they're looking for. So any way you can be creative and get that information, or get the knowledge base that you could then demonstrate on the next full-time role you're looking for, is going to be valuable.
Wonderful. Have you seen a role for pharmacy IT in a managed care setting? So, for instance, a PBM, HMO, et cetera?
Managed care is probably only about 10% of the positions that we place or where I interact on an ongoing basis. I certainly see the pharmacists bringing their knowledge base to helping those organizations with the way they're run. But at this point, I haven't seen the pharmacy IT, at least as I think about it and how I described it today. I'm not saying it's not out there. I'm not speaking with confidence that it's not out there. I haven't seen it.
You haven't had the experience in it. Wonderful.
Okay.
What type of work experience and length of time in their jobs are the companies you are working with require?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand that. Is that meaning what length of time before someone's considered to be experienced?
Yes, that
okay.
would be
Okay.
sufficient.
Answering under that standpoint, I think once the way the marketplace is today, there are certainly people out there with 10, 12 years of experience that just had an organization that took on technology, brought a pharmacist into a role. But I would say on average right now, if somebody's CV comes my way and they've been in an organization and implemented, gone through a technology project of some sort of an implementation, could be automation, could be software, a good project, and maybe a year and a half to 2 years is the type, in an informatics or an IT role, is good enough to start to stand out in today's marketplace.
Great. And I think I'm going to ask one more question, because I know we're about hit the allotted time. And that question would be, where will there be growth in the industry? Where will the jobs be in the future?
Well, as I mentioned in the slide, I think there's I would just take a look at, if you have time to look at, the aspects of becoming meaningful use compliant that organizations are trying to achieve, and looking at how it affects medication therapy process, and that's where you're going to see the growth. Right now, there's CPOE is big, medication reconciliation is big, e-prescribing is big. But these are all things, again, that are part of becoming meaningful use compliant. So right now, it's hard to look beyond that. There's a lot in the air with these things. But as I also mentioned, I think as it's have over the industry, something else will evolve. It's really hard to put a finger on it beyond what organizations are doing right now to hit that compliance factor.
Great. Thank you so much for your time today, David. If there were questions that were unanswered, we'll try to have David answer them offline, and they will be emailed out to everyone that had asked that question. With that said, thank you, David. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time out today to hear a little bit more about the evolution of pharmacy informatics. I hope everyone has a wonderful Thursday and enjoy the rest of your work week. Thanks again.